Football and filmmaking have been lifelong passions for BBC producer Ally McKenzie. After his stellar work producing 2022's TaxiJo, Ally created Match in a Minute, a short-form online video outlet that captures the live matchday experience of football across the island of Ireland.
So I started the Match in a Minute because I go to football a lot. I think that there's unique matchday experiences to be had here, especially in Ireland and in Northern Ireland as well. So the idea was to kind of give people an insight into our experience in football in this country.
It's Ally McKenzie on the scene. Ally, filmmaking or football, what is your number one passion?
That's a really good question and a tough one to answer. Filmmaking is what I do all day, every day. And football is what I think about all day, every day. So it makes sense that I kind of do both, and a lot of content that I make now is football related, but gun to the head, probably football.
Football. Okay, so what then, what inspired you to get involved with the film and TV industry?
It's something I thought about quite a bit when I was younger. When I was like really young, getting to the cinema for me was a massive treat. Well, I grew up in Scotland and the local cinema was 20, 30 miles away. So to get there was like a massive day out, and it happened maybe twice a year. And then when I moved to Bestbrook, I was like, there's a cinema in the road here. And I would go literally every week. I got like £2.50 pocket money, and that's what the cinema cost like 20 years ago. I would go constantly. And
you sound like a really old man here, Ally. I'd walk to the cinema, 2 hour walk to get to the cinema and 2 hours back.
Exactly.
Right.
And I think just as I was growing up, I loved that experience and wanted to know more, and used to watch videotapes like from start to finish and back to the start again. So naturally, I think when it came to deciding what I wanted to do, something creative was always going to be, was always what I looked for. And when I realized, in 2007 or 8 that I went to tech, I can actually study this now. I went in thinking I wanted to be a photographer, and the minute they gave me a video camera and you can make stories with these pictures, I was like, this is what I want to do. And I knew from then that was it.
And do you like the collaborative process then? Because that would be probably the big differential between photography and filmmaking. You're storytelling in both mediums to a certain extent, but filmmaking requires a lot of different people involved. Whereas photography, a lot of it you can do by yourself if you're doing landscape stuff, or you maybe only need one or two models if you're doing portrait stuff. Did the collaborative process, was that attractive to you, was it?
I think parts of it were attractive. What I probably found really difficult at the start, which everybody might find, is that you have ideas that you think are brilliant and other people have ideas that they think are brilliant. And how do you work that out between you? And how do you settle on this?
It's funny you should say that. I remember when I was at uni, and some of the ideas that I had were dog shit, and I thought they were just the class. Mm-hmm. And I had a screenwriting teacher, and I had this idea, and I'd had it all pitched. The teacher was called Roshan. He was a really big influence on me at university, and I come up with this story, right? And it was because I worked in bars for a long time, and I wrote this sitcom set in a bar, and I put so much work in it. I had like a file paper about that size of pages of stories and backstories and characters and all these sorts of things, and we had to pitch the show into the class. So what he did was he developed this thing of working in teams. He wanted to create like a television environment at uni. So you would create a show and you would pitch it to the whole class, and then the best 3 or 4 got picked, and then the best 3 or 4 had the teams of writers in them to write episodes within that. And I had this idea and I pitched it, and before going up, I genuinely thought, this is like, I am an undiscovered talent here. This show is going to be like, I just knew, I was like, this is the next Office. This is the next Office. And I pitched it and nobody got it.
Yeah.
Teacher didn't get it. Nobody got it. And I was gutted. And I just remember going, and the teacher seen that I was gutted, and I was just sitting there in my wee seat and all. And I was just like, and then he took me to his office afterwards, And
Gino were kicking you out.
Yeah. That story was so bad, I never want to see you in this room again. But he took me into his room because he could see I was really into it, and I was passionate and all, and writing was something I really wanted to do, but I just didn't know how to do it right. I didn't know the right way to go about it or whatever. And I was telling him about this, all the places that I worked and all all the different things that would, that could happen when you're in these different workplaces and all. And I said, you have no idea what these places were like. And he just looked at me and he just said, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. And that's when the light bulb went off. And I was like, I've been doing it wrong since I've been a kid. You know what I mean? You're creating the illusion of reality. You're not reciting stuff that happened in your own life, because that's primarily only going to be interesting to you. You're creating a story. You're creating something that it takes years to develop that craft. And it's going back to, early stuff that I did was just shite. And, but you're right, when you're at school or university and you start doing these things, you can be... You can't take criticism as well. You have to develop that muscle of taking criticism on, because something that you've read or whatever, it's coming from your heart or whatever, it's something very personal to you. Yeah. Suddenly when people go, no, that's shite, you go, hang on a second.
There's also a massive vulnerability in it as well, of putting your ideas out there, because I think, you're very sheltered and, you have ideas and books that you've written. And the minute you're in that environment where you have to pitch to someone, you're like, if they don't like this idea, my talent's exposed. No one knows that I don't know what I'm doing. I always kind of had that niggling thing in the back of my head. I was like, if people don't like this, am I no good?
Well, I think a lot of that is people don't like getting exposed, And so once the right work that exposes them a bit, it's like, because people wear a mask a lot of the time when they're out and about or in public or whatever. And you write something that comes from the heart, it's all of a sudden you're putting yourself out there that you probably maybe wouldn't do in social situations. So when somebody just scrumples up and throws it in the bin, goes next. It's not great, is it?
And you know what it's like coming from Newry as well? You'd say to boys, you have an idea, and I'll be like, what's that about?
I know,
what are you on about?
But see, this is the thing. Everybody thinks that they've got great ideas for shows, right? I get it all the time now with, wait to hear this one, about taxi driving or whatever. And I go, right, go on ahead. And they're telling me the story. Oh, yeah, that's dead on all, but it's in money or out the, because it's ideas, creativity, writing stuff that's of a high standard seems like an easy thing to do, but it's the hardest craft in the world, writing or storytelling to a high level. And but the best stuff comes across as effortless. So you're going to get Joe Blogg in the street going, wait to hear this one.
Yeah.
Wait to hear this one, right? My uncle one time, and you're just like, here we go.
Yeah, my favourite one is, do you know what you should make a documentary about? My uncle, he is unreal. He does this, and you're just like there's no story there.
Yeah.
That's one funny thing. How do you tell that for 30 minutes?
Exactly. Yes. So you went to the TAC then, and then that's where you started to develop an interest, a love for filmmaking. What sort of aspect of filmmaking drew you? Was it the camera side, audio? Was it, because you do a lot of documentary work? What inspired you filmmaking wise? Would it have been documentaries, or would it have been more fiction stuff?
No, all fiction. When I started the tech, it was like you said, the light bulb moment. It was just like a world was opened up to me, and I was like, oh, now I can understand films. Like beforehand I was watching them, and then it was like, wait, you can actually read these films. You can understand how they're made, what goes into it. And learn more about them. And I had a teacher called Lenny Niblock who used to just lend me DVDs of the most amazing films. He got me into the whole Scorsese back catalogue, and then it was Tarantino, and then David Lynch, and he just kept giving me these DVDs, and it just kind of opened you up. And I kind of likened it to listen to music. When you listen to one band and then you're like, well, what inspired that band and what inspired that band? That's kind of what I did. And when I was at tech, I had a part-time job in Duns, but had a lot of free time. So we'd literally come home at night and sit and watch films just constantly, maybe 2 films a night, and just couldn't get enough, just wanted to learn more about it. It was only really when I went to university that we delved into documentaries properly, and they sent us out to make our own short doc. And I went to London and made a documentary on the underground rap battle scene and just fell in love with it. I was like, okay, these are real people. And I thought there was a genuine craft in being able to take a real life story and making it entertaining and interesting for people to watch. And that's kind of when I started getting into documentaries properly.
Have you seen a film called Hoop Dreams?
No.
You've got to watch a film, Hoop Dreams. It's a documentary, sports documentary, because you're big into sports. It's the best sports documentary I've ever seen. Came out in the mid-90s. It's in a lot of people's lists as one of the greatest films ever made. It's a 3-hour documentary. It's about a variety of young families, and their kids are real proteges when it comes to basketball. So the documentary's all about following these kids from their family life to will they make it in the NBA. So some of them get to the college leagues, you know, and following the narrative behind these, because the great thing about that documentary is it opens up your eyes to the poverty in America and working class America, and, you know, amongst black culture and black families and stuff. But also, like, the NBA is different to the Premier League in the sense that in football, you've got this tiered system. You have the Premier League, you have the Championship, you have League One, you have League Two, and then you've, you know, all the leagues in Europe. You know, there's a lot, you know, I know it's still 1,000,000 to 1 shot to make it, but you've a lot better chance of making it than you have with the NBA. The NBA, there's only like, 20 teams in the whole of America. So the stakes in that documentary are so high for these kids to make it with families that can barely even afford to pay food, pay their bills or whatever. So that's something you should really check out.
Yeah. I'll add that to the growing list.
I know there's just so much. How do you? That's the thing of these days with all the, especially TV series and all that sort of stuff. How does people watch all this stuff? You know, have a job, have a career, try and make it, and then you have to watch all these films, and then the TV shows now are so good. It's like, how do you watch them all? I've got loads of them, and like mates of mine just keep recommending shows that they keep getting through. I was like, how do you get through all these shows? And I just finished Top Boy there at the weekend, which was great. It was, I really enjoyed it, but it took me a long time to get through it. I was only watching like one episode every 2 or 3 days or whatever, you know. And it's just like, how do you get through it all?
Well, I just don't have time to get through stuff.
Yeah.
And if we do start something that's like over Christmas when we're off or over the summer, I tend to just stick on the US Office every night when I've got half an hour just to kind of like relax and not have to think too much about it.
That's exactly what I do when I'm working on film sets or whatever. When I come home, it's sitcom, something to switch off, Parks and Rec or whatever.
Yeah.
And the great thing is you can just dive into any episode, away you go. You don't have to, you know, start concentrating, or, you know, you can't just, you jump past 3 episodes of Breaking Bad or whatever because
you're gone.
Yeah, absolutely. So with documentary work, then you gravitated towards it. Then it sort of meshed into your love of football as well when you'd done the documentary on Newry City. So how did that all come about?
I had made a few documentaries with Emma Rosa Diaz, who's a producer here in Belfast, and it was all about the mod scene, you know, like the music and the style and the fashion. We made a documentary in London and then went to Japan. So I actually missed my graduation because I went to Tokyo and made a documentary, which I just thought was the best thing ever, like fresh out of uni, traveling the world. And when I came home, I kind of wanted to prove to myself that I could make a documentary and direct it myself. And the story was on my doorstep, you know, like Newry at the time were down and out, and this was the climb back. And initially it was supposed to be a 10-15 minute piece. And when I got in and got the access, I was like, God, this is a season-long thing. And
you fell into a great story there, didn't you? Like, I mean, when else would you get that? You have a team that played predominantly in the top tier, sometimes the second tier. They go bust and go to the bottom, and then there's the climb all the way to the top. There's just a great story there, isn't there?
Yeah, it was easy to tell in a way. And once I got the access and the guys were all on board with it, I thought, okay, we have this. But getting in with Newry, I had the idea first of all, and I went to Gareth McCullough, who's a good friend and very close links with the club, and I went to him and said, look, I want to do this. And he was just like, okay, let's make it happen. And that's kind of how I like doing things. And people in Newry are kind of like that. It's like, if you want to do it, go and do it here. Yeah, and you're never too far away. There's a contact or two away from getting access to people. So once I got the access, it was just like, okay, let's go and do this. And it was good just to be able to, it gave me the scope to practice my skills, learning how to shoot a documentary. And if I went back now, I would do it all completely differently. But that documentary was a gateway basically into the industry for me, because it was my first producing, directing credits, the first thing that I produced that got to TV by itself on its own merit. And it gave me the credits then that I could then go to companies and be like, I'm a TV producer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's kind of fragile as that credit was at the time, but I was able to go and say, I've done it. And it was shot on like 2 cameras that like you wouldn't use these days. You know, it was the 500D and 600D.
Yeah.
It is. Well, the big thing that happened for me was I had seen the Nottingham Forest documentary called I Believe in Miracles that Johnny Owens made. And I was like, it was the first time I'd seen a football documentary that kind of merged music, fashion, and the football. And I thought, this is amazing. That kind of inspired me to make a football piece. And it kind of came full circle, because the night that we got it to Airsport in the South, Johnny Owens I Believe in Miracles was playing on BT Sport at the same time, and they were literally on top of each other in the sky, guys.
That's mad.
Yeah, so I screenshot it and sent it to him, and I was just like it's come full circle for me. He gave me a lot of advice, but for me, I was just like, that was a great sign, that it kind of worked out.
So what happened with the club? What happened? Why did they go bust?
So I think the democratic and fair way of saying it was that there was an unfair dismissal trial that had happened. The manager at the time had taken them to court, and then the club had to pay that unfair dismissal. Didn't have the funds there for it, and then I think when they looked at it, they realised that there were a lot more kind of in the hole than they thought, and I think it was just easier kind of restarting as a business than. Well,
it shows. But it shows how hard it is for, like, you look at football now and the amount of money involved in it, but it shows how hard it is at the local level, local football, keeping those clubs afloat, how important all the club people are, how important it is for fans to go to matches and stuff, because it's not as lucrative on the local side, obviously, as it is on the very top end, where it's a multi-billion pound industry. At the level of local sports, it's different, isn't it? I mean, these clubs are a threat all the time if they get relegated or whatever, aren't they?
Yeah, well, the way I look at it is when you go to Man United or Chelsea or Liverpool, your money's going into a millionaire's pocket essentially, or you're paying wages for the players. When you go to Newry City, or like we're going to Harland and Wolf tonight, you go over and you pay your £10 in. That'll cut the grass next week. That'll help to keep the floodlights on. It'll buy burgers for the tuck shop to cook. It's the grassroots, and as grassroots as you can get it. Even though we're the top division in the league, it still comes down to that. It's like every penny counts, which is what I love about it.
So you've started a new social media account, TikTok account, Match a Minute, isn't it?
Match in a Minute.
Match in a Minute, TikTok, YouTube. And I noticed the TikTok account you started about 6 weeks ago, did you, maybe?
The TikTok account started about a year ago.
Oh, right, okay. But you've only really been pushing it
pushing it hard the last couple of months, yeah.
Yeah. And what I noticed is on it that the style of your work on the TikTok account is different now to the YouTube account that you have as well. So talk about the idea of the TikTok account with this page, this Match a Minute. What's the idea behind it, and what do you hope to get out of it?
So I started the Match in a Minute because I go to football a lot. Like, I've been to 50 games this year alone, and I think that there's unique match day experiences to be had here, especially in Ireland and in Northern Ireland as well. So I was going to games and I was like, well, I think this could be interesting to people, because I talk to people all across Europe and in England, and they're like, here's my match experience, this is what it's like. And I was like, well, here's a game day, Newry going to Coleraine. And I just basically laid out the costs, because guys in England are paying £60-70 for a ticket. I did my whole day there and back with pints and food for less. So the idea was to kind of give people an insight into our experience in football in this country. And it's a growing league. It's nowhere near even what the League of Ireland would be, I don't think. But it's growing, and more people are going to the local clubs. So the idea is like...
Well, I think a lot of people are getting priced out, aren't they? They're getting priced out of everything. They're getting priced out of the TV packages. They're getting priced out... people are thinking, why am I going to be paying? I think for you to get all the Premier League football is like £70 a month or something, £60 or £70 a month.
And my season ticket's £170 for the year.
That's crazy, isn't it? Yeah. To go, and that shows, it's like people are starting to say, well, the cost of living's going up. Do I really need to watch all this, Premier League football, where I could probably watch it on the radio or go to a local? I suppose that's why the local game's grown, more so recently, in the sense that it's cheaper to go, isn't it?
Well, it's the one thing that COVID helped, is like people were missing that live experience, and whenever the football clubs opened up, but yet you couldn't travel to England or Scotland just yet, it really helped us massively, because people were coming down to watch their local teams again. And I don't care who you support in this country, if you're going to watch local football, like, I really, really respect that and want to see that growing, because it only helps the leagues and helps us.
So where do you get the time to go to all these matches?
I just make time. Like my wife asks me that every week. Like it gets to the point, where she'll be like, here, there's a wedding in 5 weeks' time. And I'm like, what day is it on? And she's like, Friday. And I'm like, right, we might have a home game that Friday. And then I'll just check. I'm like, okay, we're all good that day. Or if it's a Saturday, there'll be a compromise. It'll be like, well, can I go to the match and then go to the evening do? Sometimes, like, I do need to just say, okay, let a match go.
Yeah.
But, I just make time for it. It is my one big hobby. You'll know yourself, work is very, like, it's all encompassing. it's all you can think about sometimes. The hours can be long. I just love going to football and being able to switch off. Usually enjoy myself, which is a little bit tougher this year when we're in the top league. But that's kind of my outpouring. It's my one hobby that I can really go out and do.
The great thing about the TikTok account, about any, one of the biggest plus side of social media I find is the localization of content. Developing content and developing a following on a local level that couldn't have been achieved years ago. What you're doing with Match a Minute, you're showing the experience of going to local football with like a minute or 2 minute video montage of all the different ups and downs of each match with you do a running commentary over the top, how the match went, different things like that. It's cool to create stuff for people on a local level that they just wouldn't have got with mainstream media, because it's a lot more broad. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. And I think that's the one thing. I was always kind of opposed to picking up the phone to use it as a tool for filming, because I was very much like, use the cameras, I've been trained on that. But I actually realised this is very accessible. I don't need to take kit to a ground anymore. I can walk in with my phone.
And it's a lot less intrusive, isn't it?
It is.
If you're walking in with a big camera, people go like that. But if you're walking in, you're filming with a phone, people are just desensitized to it because everybody's doing it.
Yeah, and no one knows what you're doing. And for a long time, I was able to kind of like stay anonymous going to grounds. I was able to walk in and just film and no one would know what you were doing. But now people start to recognise the voice, and they'll say that. I've tried to.
Well, that's it. Your videos have really boomed, haven't they? On that Match a Minute, the views are very high and different things like that. TikTok's like that, isn't it? Where you can get a massive acceleration of growth on certain videos, and there's no logic as to why what ones go and why what ones don't. But it's a platform that's taken virality to a new level, really, hasn't it, in terms of content?
I think so. Like there's videos that I would make, and I'd be like, I've put so much effort into it, and I've tried to make it look really good, and I think this is great, and it goes on and flops. But there's ones where I've just done something stupid and it has like 100,000 views. But the most successful video to date was when I went to Poland with my brother. We went over for a stag do a couple of days early and just enjoyed ourselves. And I was like, tried to go to a big game, and it was moved. Basically, it was moved to later kickoff. We couldn't do it, so we went to like a 4th division Polish game on this freezing cold day in February, and people just loved it. It had 300,000 views or something, and people just couldn't get enough of the fact that you went to like a non-league game essentially over in Poland, and what that experience was like.
Talk to us about, you have a new documentary out, on Match a Minute YouTube account. Mm-hmm. So it's on the YouTube account. It's about the Drogheda and Dundalk rivalry in the Southern Irish League. Mm-hmm. How did that all come about? And just tell us a bit of background about it.
Yeah, so I'd have a few contacts and friends at both clubs in Dundalk and Drogheda. Earlier in the year, I went down to the Derby for the first time back in March and just watched it and was blown away. Like, I mean, when you talk about League of Ireland and when it comes to atmospheres in Europe, pound for pound, it is up there with anything, and that's something I never realised, because I was like, oh, it must be the same as this league. I went down and it blew me away. Went to that first Derby, flares, pyro, tifos, like massive tifos.
Well, that's the great thing about it, what you did, like, in the sense that, your eyes were opened to it, and you travel Northern Ireland, week after week, following Newry and going to all these matches, and then you go to a match in the south and your eyes were opened to the experience of the match day of Drogheda against Dundalk and that rivalry. And again, but what that'll do is the audience, when they watch it, they'll go, I never heard of this or whatever, and you see the passion of the fans in it, you see what it means to the players, and there's even a huge rivalry, Drogheda Dundalk, there beyond football, isn't it? It's political and everything.
Just as towns, they just do not get on. As towns, they like Dundalk's the administration capital of Louth. Over the years, and the touching this in the doc, but I couldn't go into too much detail. But Drogheda's been stripped kind of everything, and they have that rivalry, just that kind of sibling rivalry that's going on between the two. Yeah. And football encapsulates that perfectly, because they can actually battle that out once every couple of months. And for me, when I witnessed that derby, I kind of said to myself, I need to document this before somebody else does, And thankfully, both clubs got on board and were happy. And I think the main thing for me as well was being able to sit with players, because I've been going to Dundalk the guts of 10 years with my friend Mark Hughes, to be able to sit and interview Pat Hoobin And Chris Shields for me was just like class, because those guys are heroes. You know, they're up there with the best League of Ireland players of all time.
So the documentary you've made, it's only around about 12, 15 minutes or so, isn't it?
Yeah, 12 minutes.
And it's a great watch, but it's very different to the TikTok account. So explain the difference between, if somebody goes on to TikTok, sees your content, what's the difference between that content and then, say, watching the YouTube documentary?
Yeah, I wanted a loose link. I wanted the kind of style is more or less the same. You know, that indie kind of FIFA music is something that's always at the bed of those documentaries and the shorts on TikTok. But, you know, TikTok for me is to hook you in, and then YouTube is a way that you can actually go and explore these stories even more. So TikTok is, you know, 60 seconds, people get a flavor for it, and I want to start pushing people across to YouTube. And the YouTube was just developing that storytelling style of like, we're going to go here, we're going to interview people, we're going to give you the background on these clubs, the background on the rivalry, and then we're going to show you the experience with no commentary, no voiceover. We just want you to experience the actual noise and the match as it happened. And that's something that it's a slightly removed, but it had to be different. You know, you don't want to be doing the same thing on both platforms, I don't think.
So where do you see this going then? You know, have you any other projects lined up in the, you know, for this Match a Minute, you know, umbrella that you've created?
Yeah, I generally think it's limitless when it comes to Irish football. You know, there's hundreds and hundreds of stories out there.
And the great thing about what you're doing and what the Match a Minute account shows you is it's untapped stuff that people will watch it and go, I didn't know about that. You know, like every story in the Premier League about all the clubs is synonymous now. All of them, their whole history, the backstories, the rivalries, everybody knows all that inside out. But there's something here that will interest people because they've never heard of it before.
Yeah. And I think the good thing with that as well is that most people that go to football, there's YouTube vloggers that go and they film themselves and here's my experience of it. I don't want that. You know, I actually want to give people almost like a mini TV show. Here's the story of the clubs. Here's the story of the derby, and here's how it worked. And that's you know, that's something that I really want to make it like good quality films that people can watch, but also in short bite sizes. So when you're sitting eating your cereal in the morning, you can learn about the Louth derby. And I've never been one for putting myself forward in terms of like nobody wants to watch me going to Oriel Park showing that experience, but I think I could capture that experience better through my camera.
So you're an avid cinema goer as well. You know, you had a real affiliation to it when they took you walked 500 miles to get to the cinema when you were a child in Scotland, funny enough. Where do you see the future of cinema? Because this film industry now is at a bit of a crossroads, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting one. I always go to the cinema and always enjoy going, and we would go regularly, probably once or twice a week. I do feel it needs to become a more immersive experience, I think, to reach the wider audience and to pull them back in. You know, people don't really look at the cinema anymore as my first date place, or they don't look at it as let's go. It's often the last resort if nothing else is on for people, or something big like Barbie or Oppenheimer comes out that has that huge kind of like build up.
Well, I think Oppenheimer showed that because the large format thing, I think, drew a big enough audience in to watch Oppenheimer. But I would be fearful of the future of the cinema. You know, it is at a bit of a crossroads at the minute because of the choice of content out there, because of how good television is, because of how good TVs are getting and how cheap they're getting. You know, you look at someone can have a cinema-like experience in their living room, you know, and you would, like in the 1990s, you had a square TV, you know, and the television wasn't shot in a cinematic way. It was all done, you know, it was like Only Fools and Horses in a live studio or whatever. You went to the cinema to see these grandeur cinematic things, whereas now you're in control of all that. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And then you go to the cinema, right? You're in the house, you're in control of your TV, control of the sound, you're in control of everything. You're handing that control off to somebody else. And I know a lot of cinema goers, well, not cinema goers, sorry. I know a lot of film lovers that don't like going to the cinema. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Why?
Because it's full of people. It's full of people eating. It's full of noise. It's the hassle of going there. I love going to the cinema, by the way, but I just know a lot of people don't. Yeah. And it's, you know, as I said, it's all the disruptions around them. It's the noise around them. I find for me, my cinema going experiences can be tainted now because of the lack of expertise when it comes to projection, you know, the lack of quality control and all that. You know, sometimes you go to the cinema and you walk in, you're only a person in the screen. So, you know, the staff aren't really going to give a monkeys about one person sitting on a big screen. And sometimes the stuff plays and the screen's not quite right. The color, you know, the brightness of it's not right. Sometimes the lights are left on inside. You know what I mean? That's what I'm talking about. When you're handing that control over to people that are just there for, you know, a minimum wage or whatever. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, do you know what? I'm the same. And my wife always says to me, like, so we went the other night to see Equalizer 3, and it was the first time, I think, probably in the last 20 visits to the cinema, that we've actually said there was no noise, there was no distractions. And it's one thing that really does bug me, is like, you pay your money, you go in and sit there, and people are sitting on their phones. Like, you can't go an hour and a half without checking whatever it is that you need to check. And obviously the lights are blaring up in the cinema, it's distracting. You know, you go there for an immersive experience, you go there to switch off and just get lost in the story. And it's one thing that really, really bugs me, is like talking, nattering. Even popcorn, I think, should be banned from cinemas. I can't have the rustling, you know. So in saying that, like, those are quite negative things, but I do love when it's a good experience. I just love going in there and switching off for a few hours and coming out, and it might still be daylight outside, but you've just gone and seen.
I love it, and I think I remember when I went to see Dunkirk. You know, it was years ago now, and you're thinking about what can cinema bring that the audience can't get in their living room, right? And I went to see Dunkirk in IMAX, and I was blown away by it. And then I seen it again in just standard cinema, and it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same experience. Same with Oppenheimer. I've seen Oppenheimer in IMAX, and then I've seen it again in a normal screening. And the IMAX, the scale of it, the immersion of it, I think the cinema needs to go all in on something like that, you know, to create this immersion that again offers the audience something different than what they're getting with television. Do you know what I mean? I think Nolan is the driving force in the film industry at the minute, where he's giving audiences a reason to go to the cinema. You know, he's creating these big grand scale things where you go, right, need to go to the cinema to watch that. Top Gun was like that. Yeah. You know, Top Gun, he had to go to the cinema to watch that. And I've seen it in the TV since, and it's great, like, but it's not the same as the cinema. It's something you needed to go to the cinema to see.
I genuinely think Top Gun saved cinema, like, post-COVID. That was the one that got everybody back out. I've never seen anything like it. Like, I went with my mum, you know, she loved it from back in the day. I took her for a birthday, and it blew us away. Like, just couldn't get over the cinematography and getting cameras actually into those planes and making it so, like, that you felt that you were in that plane with them. And that's what it needs to do, is to take it to the next level.
Another thing that I seen where I was looking at it going, that could be dodgy for cinema. Did you see? I know it's very expensive, so they'll probably not shift that many of them next year. But Apple's new thing, it's like a goggle thing that goes around your eyes. It's like a VR type of thing. But they showed somebody with it around their head, and they showed them watching something, and that whole this big immersion around them, and there's all the spatial audio around their head and all. I was looking at that going, now I know it probably won't take off next year, but you're thinking 5-6 years down the line, will people be doing that instead of going to the cinema? You know, I think we need to, and the industry as a whole needs to think innovation. How are we gonna, you know, rather than putting out sequels and superhero movies all the time? I think people are bored of that, aren't they?
Yeah, I think that's one thing that's kind of put me off the whole experience. I really enjoyed the Marvel films when they first came out. And then it's like, every time you go to cinema now, there's 4 or 5 adverts for superhero films. And, it, you know, I think it's lost on people, but genuine original storytelling still holds true. Like, when I went to see Parasite, it's one of the films that have stuck with me the longest, seeing in the cinema. You know, just genuinely good storytelling. And, you know, I think with cinema, for 100 years, the principle has been exactly the same. Sit here and watch something projected onto a wall. It hasn't really changed. You know, they might have changed some of the dynamics, but it's been the same mostly. So it's going to be interesting. You know more about that from your field than mine, you know, working in films, but it will be interesting to see how it grows. So what does a producer do? Do you know what? I've been producing stuff for like over 10 years, and it's still a question that's really difficult to actually say. Like, you know this yourself. It's so difficult to explain what a producer does, because in documentary, essentially, it's everything. You know, like, you're working up an idea, you're researching it, you're developing that idea to a point where you can go out and film, you're finding contributors, you're filming, you're sitting in the edit with people, you're delivering. Like, it involves absolutely everything, depending on the budgets that I work with as well. But there's what you really excel at. There's an element to producing where it's being in dialogue with other people, getting on the phone, organizing things, getting people together. That can be a very difficult thing to make sort of all fit together, can't it? I think that's the one area that a lot of people would think, yes, I am good at that area and I can always find contacts in that, but it's the one area I struggle with as well. Because believe it or not, sitting like talking to people isn't something I actually enjoy doing. It works out I'm good at it, but I'd often panic about certain things or get very anxious about it. Doing podcasts sends me over the edge. But, coming up with an idea, as we said earlier, you think every idea is brilliant. Over the years, I've kind of learned now to sit on an idea for a couple of days before I'll jump in and start thinking, okay, let's get the wheels into motion for this. If I do have an idea for a film or for a documentary, pretty quickly, like I can research it and find out who I need and then reach out and start making those contacts and trying to get people on side. And I think that's the thing is, as long as you're coming from the right angle, people will always be with you. Like I'm not doing any like groundbreaking, investigative journalism documentaries, particularly like the football ones. I'm trying to find stories in there and find the right characters. But I think the skill in producing is how do you find the right people? How do you put them on camera and how do you tell their story?
And then budget obviously is a huge thing when it comes to producing as well. You've so many things to consider with money you have or potentially the lack of money you have. So it means you have to become very resourceful with what you have, don't you?
Yeah. And from a young age, like I'm sure you're the same boat and every filmmaker is, you grabbed a camera, you saved up enough to get a camera and you went out and just started filming. And that's what I did from a young age. So I think I've always had that mentality of, well, just go out and do it and don't wait for funding. And in the past, I've received funding for things and it's always been nice. But for the likes of this Drogheda Dundalk thing, I just thought, I'm going to set myself a budget that I have. I'm just going to go out and film it and make sure I don't go over that. And essentially my budget was just petrol money, So I think it's just, if you have a desire to tell a story, you can't sit around and wait for too long. You need to just get moving on it.
And the thing with documentary too, a lot of the time it can be cheaper than, standard filmmaking. You don't have a massive crew, you don't have a massive cast. You know what I mean? A lot of the time it's you going out to meet the subject matter, you and somebody else or whatever. So one of the big pluses of documentary work is that you can be in control of a lot of it. Isn't that right?
Yeah. Documentary, when you are a producer, you're a self-shooting producer more often than not. So you can pick up a camera, you can go out and you can be kind of inconspicuous. You're not standing there. Unfortunately, you don't always get a sound man with you. So like back in the day, like you would have had, even for documentaries, 4, 5, 6 people standing around. These days, you're running sound, you're running the camera, you're also asking questions. So you do have to kind of hone those skills. And I think that's one thing that I learned from early on was I just did everything because I had to. Like I would shoot, I would produce, I would ask questions. And the way the industry has changed in those kind of 10 years even is just that it's more self-sustaining now. Journalists are going out and shooting their own pieces to camera. They're going out and shooting their own interviews now. They're no longer getting cameramen out with them all the time. And with the industry changing, I've kind of felt like I've always done that, so I've fitted in quite nicely with.
But it's the technology has moved us there, hasn't it? It's a lot more accessible now. Editing software, like state of the art editing software, some of it you can get for free. Cameras, the image quality in cameras now is unbelievable. Even the image quality in some phones. So the technology is making that sort of one-man band style of filmmaking a bit easier, isn't it?
Yeah, and like when I was teaching in the tech, there was kids coming in and had no previous experience at all and were putting together videos that were unbelievable because they've been making YouTube videos and TikToks or Instagram at the time. Whereas when I went to tech, you got a camera for the first time, you shot it on tape and then it had to be captured in real time. So it wasn't as accessible. Now that you can go out and you've got cameras that the autofocus on them is ridiculous, so you can go out there and just trust that it's going to be capturing what it needs to capture. So all that really helps. So when it comes to filmmaking these days, you can kind of focus on what you need to focus on. Tell
us a bit about how you got your opportunity with the BBC then.
So I was working with Afro Mike and we had produced quite a few documentaries for the BBC, including The Search. That was one where we were out with the Community Rescue Service essentially for a year, on call whenever someone in the country went missing. We would get the phone call to say, get to Portrush, and I'm in Bessbrook and I have to get up to Portrush quickly, and we filmed The Search.
And what was that for? What did that go out on?
That was The Search. That was for BBC Northern Ireland at the time. So we just spent a full year with the rescue service, which was a tough gig,
And how was that? What sort of jobs do they have? What's it like? What's their life like when they're going out to save people all the time?
Well, I mean, they're all volunteers, so they're working or they're at home with the family getting the dinner and they get the same phone call that I was getting. and it was saying, get up here, there's someone that's been missing for a day, we need to go and find them. You could turn up and it could be a case of, okay, they're down the road and it's all fine, or you could turn up and it could be a 3-week search for that person. So, I was documenting that along with Sarah Breen, who was the director on it, and it really opened your eyes to just the work and the amazing stuff that those volunteers do. You're turning up. My job was to try to give the audience some kind of semblances to here's what they do, here's the sacrifice that they go through. But
it's amazing the stuff people that do out there that goes unnoticed, isn't it? Mm-hmm. That they're not shouting from the rooftops, they're not on Twitter talking shite, they're out there and they're very dignified. They're going out there doing these things, and they're not looking for a gold medal, they're not looking for a handshake or whatever. They're just doing it because they feel like it's the right thing to do. And it's such a lovely thing for people to do, really, isn't it?
It is. And when we went to searches, you have to identify who the key people are. So this person has a story, then we're going to follow them as in the volunteers. It was the reluctance of most of them to have any attention on them, because they're like, I just want to come here and help out. I'm not doing it for this reason. I don't want to be on TV. I'm here to help people. And that was the amazing thing that really struck me, that sometimes you had to twist a few arms to be like, can we just follow you for the day and see what you get up to? But that was amazing. And from there then, I made a few more things for the BBC, made a short film about my wife. And then when lockdown hit, I applied for a job and thankfully got it.
Brilliant. And so what's your working week like then? Because as a producer, as you've mentioned, you could be doing anything, couldn't you, really? You could be shooting, you could come up with a concept, you could be talking to clients, or it can be a multitude of things you're working with, can't it?
Yeah, it's always along, like the 3 blocks I put it down to is pre-production and then post-production. So I'm always on one of those 3 blocks, whether it be working up ideas and shooting taster tapes, or you're out filming on a series, or you're sitting in the edit. You're always on one of those. But no matter what you're at, the hours aren't always just 9 to 5. It's a demanding job sometimes, and you put yourself out there and do hours that most people would probably complain about, but it's always for the good of the story that you're working on. Well,
that's the thing, and I see it too, working in the film and TV industry. You have to love it, really, don't you? Otherwise, you're going to have a miserable life. If you want to get in it for the money or the kudos or to tell people you work in the film industry, you're going to have a miserable life, aren't you? You got to love it. You have to love it, because it sucks up so much of your life, doesn't it?
It does. And as I said at the very start, like your first question, it's what I do all day, every day, but it is what you think about. And when you read the newspaper, you're like, does that make a good story? Does that make a good story? You're talking to somebody in the town and they'll say, oh my, like, I know I laughed about it earlier, but they're like, oh, my cousin does this. And you're like, is that a story? Is that something that you could pursue? Is that a 5-minute piece, or is that a 30-minute piece? So you have to enjoy it. And I think it's become so ingrained in me now that it's just part of my life that, I don't really think of it as a job. It's just something I really love doing. And, when I do think about maybe going back 10 years and I was struggling to get money and to make a living at it, to think that I would make a living and be here now, it's just, it is great,
Can deadlines be tough? Can the time frame between, when you've got a show and when you've got to get it complete, can that be a tough thing to achieve sometimes?
It can be. I'll work back from a deadline, obviously, and it's one thing I think I'm very good at, is hitting my deadlines and hitting all of my markers along the way, and giving myself a week deadline before the actual deadline to make sure that it's in. So when it comes to program making, I find that okay. But when it comes to actual live TV, deadlines are just a completely different ballgame. It's like a deadline is at 9:30 and you've got 4 VTs to get ready, and everybody's like working and trying to pull together to get it done, and your adrenaline is through the roof.
So, have you ever seen Movie Network?
No.
Yeah, you should watch it.
It's another one.
Yeah, another one. It's about the television industry, funny enough. So I think you'd really like it. It's about a news corporation, and it's a black comedy based on that. It's not like a ha-ha comedy. It's more of it just shows the absurdity of the television industry, and this was back in the 70s, but it shows the manicness of the live TV scale and production, and when something happens on camera that shouldn't happen and all that sort of thing. So what's the difference then the primary difference between live television, because I've never done live television. What's the primary difference between live television and then something that you can just do in your own time?
Well, obviously the basic thing is like if you mess up, you've messed up.
Yeah.
You know, you can always cover mistakes. If you've shot something badly, you can cover it in post usually, or you can cover it for yourself. But live TV it's happening right there and then. So everything needs to be ready to go. But I think the key thing is when you're program making, you know, you're working with a small team, 3 or 4, an editor, an executive, or a cameraman, whoever it might be. But when you're live TV making, you've got such a team there, and everybody, like it is literally cogs. Like it's like everybody's doing one thing that's going to affect someone else. So it's just the communication, you know, and keeping those lines open. But I can't describe to you the adrenaline of getting to air now. And my job isn't even that, you know. I suppose in certain shows that I've worked on live, my job isn't massive in the grand scheme of things. But when you like, I can't imagine what a director and the producers of those shows must.
I can just imagine someone throwing books at you and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And you know when you hear the talk back and all, and like the presenters live on air, and you're hearing, okay, we're gonna go to this, we're gonna go to that, we're gonna go to this. Like, how do they concentrate?
Yeah, crazy. I suppose it's just a completely different environment, isn't it? It's something you need to have been brought up with, grew with, whatever. But I would say it's developed tremendous amount of skills for you in terms of learning how to deal with pressure and different things like that, would it?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't tend to get too overwhelmed with anything in work. I think I'm very relaxed and just take a nice approach to it. Live TV can push that to a certain degree, where you need to just be confident in what you're doing and just stick with it, you know. But again, it all comes back to the same principle. Like, you have a deadline, so you just work back from your deadline and just try to make sure that you've hit everything along the way. And of course, just give yourself a backup. Like if something happens, that you've got something else ready to go. So you're juggling a lot of plates, but honestly, it's one of the best feelings ever is when a TV show finishes and you're just sitting there and you're like, oh, that's done. We got through it, you know. And then you're getting ready for the next one.
Ally helped produce the TaxiJo series we did last year. It left me to do my thing, you know, left me to do my TaxiJo thing. You got a lot of stuff in the background, all sorted, tons of stuff. Remember the night shoot we were on and stuff. What sort of challenges did you see? And I suppose it's different from the work you're normally used to, isn't it?
Yeah. I tell you what I found really challenging was the length of time that it takes to cover a scene. Because for me, I'm making a documentary, I go and shoot that coverage within like 10, 15 minutes as it's happening, and then I have to make sense of that. But to be doing a setup and then doing another setup and another setup, like it was just a real slow down thing for me. Because all the work was done at that point. When you guys were filming, I was just assisting and helping you out. But to actually sit and see that, I found that challenging. My like attention span was just like, right, what's next? Like, keep moving. And as you said, that's like a microcosm. Like that's so slow, like so fast. Sorry, compared to what you usually do.
Yeah.
But for me, that was like, it was really, I suppose I got to respect the work that you guys do of being like, this is how long it takes to actually set up a shot.
And that's why it costs so much money. With filmmaking costs, you know, and why it's really tough out there at the minute for the film industry, for the TV industry, because of the amount of content, how competitive it is, and people, as I said, I've said it before many times, don't realise it costs so much money and takes so much time to make these things, doesn't it? Yeah,
it does. But do you know what? I have to say, I really, really love being involved in it. And I loved when you rang me. Like there was one day I was just sitting in the house, and whenever you see Gino's number pop up, you're like, what's he going to ask for next? And you rang me and you're like, well, I need a helicopter and I need, there's something else. Oh yeah, I need a helicopter and I need Charlie Lawson. And I was like, right, okay, leave it with me. And then I rang you back like an hour later. I was like, right, Charlie Lawson sorted, more or less. I've got his agent there, but I can get you an airplane. Is that all right? And you're like, that'll do, yeah.
Oh, funny enough, no, because you got the heli place. We went down the helicopter road because in the last episode there's an airplane in it. The airplane flies off, TaxiJo waves at it and stuff, and it was a cool way to end the series, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was class.
But you went down the helicopter road with me because I remember you got a helicopter place sorted in Newton Ards, didn't you?
That's right, yeah, that's right.
So, because I remember, because it was my dad got he rang a producer he works with, and he was talking to her about helicopters, and she says, don't use a helicopter, they're a nightmare. What about an airplane? And we immediately thought, well, surely an airplane's harder to get than a helicopter, but an airplane's actually easier to get and it's safer because helicopters are a health and safety nightmare. I know of actors approaching a vehicle that's got propellers that are moving around and all that sort of thing, you know. So it was a wacky thing to do, wasn't it? There was also, brilliant. You know, and like there was so many moments like that, wasn't there, where And then those COVID outbreaks, there was loads of moments in it where you were just like, this isn't going to happen. How are we going to get this over the line? You know?
And do you know what? I remember you ringing me early on about it, and then it was delayed for a while, and I was just like, whenever you're ready, give me a call. I'll pick it up and help you with whatever. But I loved even things like, and this is where I think your skills producing come into, is your contacts that you make. And you were like, right, we need to film in a secure location overnight, and this is what we're doing. And then it was like ringing people I knew that worked in car parks and being like, give me your boss's number so I can ring and get that overnight. And I loved actually that when you give me the breakdown of locations, getting access to that, you know, contacting the police and making sure we were okay to be filming.
The cool thing about what us two doing that in Newry was we know Newry inside out and back to front, you know, where, you know, there's brilliant locations, people in the film industry, of course there is, but they're not going to know Newry as well as we do. We know every road, how busy it's going to be at different times of day. We know all the people in it, we know all the buildings, you know, and that did become so beneficial when we were doing the night shoot, didn't we? Because we could just navigate through the night where we were going to go, and it ran very smoothly then, didn't it?
It did. And one of my favourite things was, I think it was the very first shot that we shot that week of the night shoots, where we had the police car at the side of the road.
Oh, yeah. And
then an actual police car came up behind you with the blues on. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And everyone was like, Ollie, you go and talk to them. And I was like, is there a problem here? And like, no, we got a call out, and they thought that you were in an actual police car attending that thing. So I was like, no, we're just filming here, and then they went on. But
lucky enough, we got the permission and different things we got. I remember another thing was where I was driving the taxi. I had to get a shot. It was just driving through the airport, you know, and I had to park up. And funny enough, I think it was you phoning me, and I had to park up because there's no hands free in the thing, and I parked up, got on the phoned Ally. Next thing, cops landed around, you know, and stopped me. What are you doing? And all. And he's like, oh no. So I was parked outside a security place or whatever.
Right.
You know, and had cameras and all, and they're all like, oh, that turned into a palaver. But eventually they were cool about it and all, you know. But it just shows that, you know, do you remember the night where we had the police car and we had Anna Maria was with us that night, and she left her shoes in the cop car. And Noel took the cop car back to Tandrigee or something like that. Yeah. And then we had no shoes for Anna Maria that night.
That's right, yeah. And you rang me and you were like, where's his number? And the car was gone.
The car was gone, yeah. And then he says, oh, I could get somebody to meet me in Bangor or something like that. And we couldn't do it because we were down in Newry, you know. So we had to come up with a plan B, didn't we?
Yeah.
You had to get an off pair of shoes, which I think ended up turning out better shoes. But there was this whole palaver the whole day. How are we going to get these shoes? Wasn't there? Like,
it was amazing. And do you know what I just loved though? It was like, it was a tough week in that, you know, it was overnights for people. It was freezing cold in that kind of January, but everybody just mucked in. And I remember just sitting one night, everybody was eating a Friar Tuck's outside at like 3 a.m. or whatever. Yeah. And it was just like, but you know, that's what you brought, is like, you brought in a good crew of people who you knew that you could trust, because it was going to be a tough week for people. And I think it got the best out of them.
Yeah. The key element to it was, when we were shooting it, was to create an environment where people are enjoying themselves and having a good time. And just know that, like, for me, because there's a lot of stress, pressure, all sorts of things happening that week. But for me, it was to keep the head all week and try to make sure everybody's really enjoying themselves, and then it just elevates everybody then, you know. And a lot of people put so much free time into it and came down to Newry and all. It was a cool thing, wasn't it?
It was. And one thing I remember you saying to me, it was just like, you just want to make sure people were kept at a good level throughout the week. So I just went and made coffees and teas and heated up food and just pulled them over when they had a minute, and just making sure that they were stocked up. Kind of like when the series started rolling, my work was more or less done. Yes. It was all done in pre-production, really. So I was just happy to help out, and it worked out a massive success. And selling out the IMAX that night, or the
it was brilliant, wasn't it?
That was unreal. You know, like, that was one of the nights where you're literally sitting here, you're thinking, a year ago we got to work on this, and now we're sitting in a sold out cinema, like, which is testament to kind of the following that you built with it.
There with TaxiJo, you've seen something that's developed online, develops a little community, you know. It grows from small videos to bigger videos, and then we do a cinema screening and all that. Do you see that as a potentially, we were talking earlier on about the future of cinema, you know, how are we going to get people into the cinemas again? Do you think, like, potentially localizing cinema interests will help, could be something to help getting audiences into the cinema again? You know, creating something like what I did with TaxiJo, and then there was the Reeve Brothers thing come out. I think that was the year before, wasn't it?
I think so,
yeah. So, do you know what I'm saying? Because you do generate an interest there, because it's of local subject matter, rather than just a constant stream of American stuff or British stuff coming into the cinemas. A mix of localized stuff, in the sense that it's accessible to do these things now. The cameras are out there to do it. Like what I achieved with TaxiJo last year would have been impossible to do 5 years ago, never mind 10 years ago. You know what I'm saying? So is that a potential you see with the future of storytelling cinematically on a potentially local level in all sorts of areas?
I think there's definitely something in that. I do think that cinemas price themselves quite heavily for you to go in and screen something.
Yes.
Which is something that, you know, that we worked with.
Exactly.
The costings to go in to rent the screen out don't make it favourable for people who might not have money behind you. Like, you know, if you were self-funding that, as you did, you self-funded it. When it comes to the point where you don't really have a marketing budget, you don't really have the money to go and do that. That was a stretch.
Yeah, that
doesn't help.
Yeah,
but those actual events were amazing, and it centralizes it into that community. It was a film about Newry. It was about Newry people. Newry people worked on it. It had to be in Newry, but you know, things like that don't make it favorable. And I think,
like, you know, maybe they should become more favorable in the future. Do you know what I'm saying? You know, if you get that buzz and that interest around a project like that. You know, like Avatar 2 came out the next day, right? And it grossed 2 billion worldwide. Now, there wasn't the same level of interest in Newry as there was saying the TaxiJo thing it did. Now, that just taps back into what I was saying about localizing things. And, you know, it's just something cinema should be looking at. Just looking at new ways of storytelling and not becoming bland.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one area that it does work. You know, building up local contacts and having people from the local area working on it to go and sit in the cinema, and the fact that TaxiJo was sitting in the back row, like that's amazing. You would never go to a film and really get that kind of feeling, would you? Yeah,
well, like, yeah, you know, you could create something like that where you go on the road with it, and you know, that's a potential thing that could be done in the future. But you know, as you say, like there was a hell of a lot of work went into it, and as we mentioned before, like, and this sums up the online communities. You're finished it and somebody comes up to you straight after and goes, when's the next one? You know, you know, people want that you know, so there's a lot of work goes into it, but it's potentially
funny. Just when you said that, I remember you sent me the cut of all 6. And I texted you saying I can't wait for episode 7, and then I deleted it. I was like, no, I don't want to do that to him. I was like, can't wait for episode 7 just to kind of and I was like, no, I'm not going to put that pressure on him and annoy him.
And what would your dream project be?
My dream project, Netflix gave me £10 million to follow Newry City for 4 years.
What advice would you give to somebody who is looking to get into the film industry?
I think it's an industry where you have to kind of make your own way in it in certain ways, and you need to go out there and get experience, because the first thing people ask you for is a CV or a show reel, and if you have nothing to really show, then there's no value in it. I think what I did for years, I'm sure you did it for years, was just shoot projects and just build up those skills. And what I did with the boxing over years was just spend time and develop my storytelling skills, working on shorter content with people, and just had a show reel of content that when people asked for it, it was there. So I think, you know, if you are looking to get into it, make contacts, reach out to people. I remember sending emails to Seamus McGarvey when I was in tech. I remember sending emails to different people just to get advice, just to get conversations with them, to put myself on the radar. And it was just learning from everybody. But I think one of the key things is going in with an open mind and not having any assumed knowledge, and just being open.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Everybody has different ways of working, and you've 2 people who've done the same job for 30 years but have completely different ways of doing it. So you going in and trying to pretend like you know what you're doing never helps. You know, you have to be open-minded and you have to be willing to learn from people. I think the key thing is always finding stories that excite people and telling those stories, because if you're not excited about it, nobody else will be, and that's what we're always told as well.
Absolutely. Ally, thank you very much for coming in today. It's been fantastic. Loved it. Loved working with you on TaxiJo. You just constantly put out fires, which really helped us get the project over the line. If you weren't there, God knows what could have happened. The plane could have went on fire or whatever, literally. So thanks very much. Hope to work with you again in the future. It was a great partnership. Thanks for coming in, and good luck with Match a Minute. Check him out. Check it out on TikTok. It's called Match a Minute, isn't it?
Match in a Minute.
Match in a Minute. I keep going Match a Minute. Match in a Minute. YouTube, TikTok. Check it out. And until next time, I'll see you after.